So for the first clip, I was going for a dramatic, almost epic feel. For my frame rate, I used 60 FPS so that it was smooth when I slowed it down by 40% to put it in slow motion. So my shutter speed was 1/1000, which is how high I had to go in order to get the really crisp shots of the cards falling through the air in slow motion. To get a shallow depth of field, I set my aperture to 1.8, which let the camera focus on the cards in the middle of the shot, with the cards in the foreground and the background being blurred. This was shot in low light, so I set the ISO to 800. Both the ISO and the low aperture help brighten it, and then I used a lamp to get a little more light in. I set the white balance to 3600K for indoors. For this clip, I wanted an urban, real-life vibe. I set my frame rate to 30 FPS to get the real-life look, and then the shutter speed to 1/50, which is doubled. I set my aperture higher to f10 because I wanted the mural in front of and behind the subject to be in focus while he's walking. Since he isn't doing too much in the scene, the real action is in the mural changing as he walks, so I want it in focus. I set the ISO to 400 since we were in a cloudy alley, but I think I should have gone down to 200 because it looks a little overexposed. The white balance is set to 5600K to make the outside look realistic. For this clip, I was going for a relatable scene of someone watching life pass them by. I set the frame rate to 30 FPS to make it feel relatable and like we're watching someone think about life in real time. I set the shutter speed to 1/30, which is the lowest my camera goes, to get the cars to be blurry while they go by to feel like life's passing them by, while the buildings and mountains in the background aren't in focus. So I set my aperture to f16 to get it a bit darker and have the buildings in focus to contrast the blur of the cars. Since the shutter speed was so low and we were outside, I used an ND filter and then put the ISO to 800, and I liked how the brightness turned out since the clouds weren't blown out. The white balance is at 5600K again to make it feel realistic so you could relate to the subject. I also sped it up by 120% to make the cars look faster because the speed limit on this road was just way too slow.